Okay, it's another week, another podcast. The New Hampshire primary is coming up on Tuesday, September 13th. So this week we thought we'd take some time to talk to some candidates, and we've got a whole bunch of them for you. We have David McRae, who's running in the town of Merrimack for the New Hampshire House. We have state Senate candidates Steve Kenda and Joe Duart. We have two more House representatives running, John Washburn and Andrew Kohlhofer. That and a bunch more. Stay tuned. Quick break. We'll be right back. The 603 Alliance is hosting world-renowned author Trevor Loudon in Nashua for the New Hampshire premiere showing of the new film based on his best-selling book, The Enemies Within. The premiere showing is next Friday, September 16th, 7 p.m. at the Crown Plaza in Nashua. Tickets are only $10 per person. You can reserve a spot in advance and pay at the door, or you can pay online at 603alliance.org. If you would like additional information about the event or Trevor Loudon, please contact event manager Di Lothrop at 603-864-9287. Earlier this week, I had a chance to talk to Andy Kohlhofer, who's running for the New Hampshire House from Rockingham District 33. Great conversation, lots of topics. Give a listen. All right, we are talking to Andy Kohlhofer, who is running for the New Hampshire House in Rockingham 33. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and we're going to have a little conversation about some of the issues, and let's just start with tell us a little bit about yourself and then why you chose to run for the New Hampshire House.
All right, well, I've, what should I say? Well, I actually chaired the Methuen Republican Town Committee for a number of years. In Methuen, Massachusetts, and during that time we grew to be one of the biggest town committees in the state, and we actually supported Mitt Romney, of course, over Ted Kennedy, and we beat Ted Kennedy in Methuen by 4 votes, which was pretty good. Pretty proud of that one. And then I moved to New Hampshire, and I subsequently became involved in the Budget Committee, and on the Budget Committee when I was on the Budget Committee for the first time, the school budget was actually voted down at the annual meeting. We were able to reduce the cost of our schools by significant amounts over the next 4 years. And I ran for the school board, and we reformed. The first thing we did is we reformed the school, reorganized it, and we were able to keep costs down at least for the first 5 years I was on there. Last year, things kind of got out of control. And I'm running for state office because I really believe that America is going in the wrong direction. I believe that people are trying to substitute a country based in social justice rather than a country based in liberty. And it's my intent to fight as hard for the principles that to preserve liberty as those who do fight for to change over to social justice. And that's really why I'm running for a state rep.
So you've probably paid some attention to what goes on in the legislature. What is it that you've seen in, we'll just say the last 2 years, for example, that you'd like to change?
Well, a lot of things I'd like to change. One thing, I think the legislature stand up to the court system regarding the courts trying to tell the legislatures how to raise money for education. I think that's completely improper. The courts have no authority. They recently awarded a $14.5 million award to, they want the legislature to pay Dover $14.5 million. The Supreme Court has no authority to tell the legislature to raise funds. And I think the legislature tell the courts, sorry, we've taken care of it. We're phasing out the caps on aid, and we're not raising the money, so too bad. I think some of the other things I've seen are the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which has raised the cost of energy in this state. It's made it extremely hard for businesses to get started in this state. And I think we need to eliminate the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. There's too many people who want to keep it because, we're getting money from it. We can give it back to customers. Well, why take money from the customers and then give it back to them? It makes no sense. Let them keep it in the first place. I actually read regarding the solar power and the net metering, and my eyes roll back into my head. You can't even understand it. It's so complicated. It's absolutely ridiculous. Net metering is one of the stupidest things. A couple states have eliminated it. We need to follow that. Let the energy market be the energy market, which also means we have to fight to get greater access to natural gas in the state.
So you're not a fan of the renewable fuel standard then either?
Yes, get rid of that. Get rid of that whole thing. I mean, to get rid of the other thing too that I've seen is like something the Democrats did is they expanded the definition of wetlands,
Mm-hmm.
and that took tens of thousands of acres in New Hampshire out of production. We actually have I know someone owns a piece of property here in Fremont, who their family had lumbered that property for 200 years, and he no longer can do it because of that rule. And not only does that cost the town money because we no longer can charge a timber tax, but now the land is virtually worthless, and what we can tax it on is gone down dramatically. The other thing too is my property taxes have gone up almost 250% in the last 19 years actually. Yet the value of my house is not even doubled the assessment. So I think we need to take a look at how what the legislature requires and how the policies it has regarding municipal government and schools especially. I think schools we need to completely take a look at our school system. I'm for absolute free school choice, but for school choice to work, you have to have no regulations regarding schools, so people have an absolute choice of what type of school they want. We need to get rid of the Blaine Amendment in the Constitution so that people can have educational savings account and use that money towards going to maybe religious schools. I think we need to take a real look at the accepting of federal money for our school system because the regulations that come along with that federal money are extraordinarily burdensome. An example, our food vending contract is 20 pages devoted strictly to federal regulations, which is ridiculous. So, I mean, those are some of the things I'm looking at. I'm looking at changing the land use regulations. I'd love to cut the number by 50%. I think we need to look at the education regulations and start cutting that. In fact, I would love to eliminate the Department of Education here in New Hampshire because it's just duplicative of the State Board of Education, which is actually by statute and by the Constitution has the authority to run the schools of New Hampshire. So we really don't need a Department of Education.
Second Amendment.
Second Amendment, definitely. I actually believe we should pass a law allowing people in municipalities to form their own militias. That's really what the Second Amendment's all about. And the militias, of course, would be under the guidance and control of the governor, but these militias would have to, they'd elect their own officers, unless there's someone who's part of the militia who's already in the National Guard and an officer there, they would be the officer, and they have to supply their own weapons and maintain them themselves in their own uniforms. But I really believe that, and we should also get rid of the stupid safe guns policy that schools have been adopting, because it doesn't make schools, saying we can't have guns in school does not make schools safer. People aren't going to say, oh, they have a safe gun policy, I can't go in there and hurt anybody. What we need to do, all it is it's really a backdoor way of getting anti-gun ideology into the schools. And so we need to eliminate that policy because it doesn't make schools any safer. I believe in freedom to carry, and I also believe in freedom to concealed carry. I think people should be allowed to do it.
You would support the optional concealed carry permit?
Yes, I would.
Alrighty. Voter ID residency, domicile, big issue in the state for years and years and years. A couple of really bad judicial decisions. What do you think about that, and how do you think we fix it?
Well, the problem is we need to go through all the laws and consistently say what a domicile is, because it's contradictory through all the statutes in New Hampshire. So we probably even set a commission up and just have them go through every single law where domicile or resident is mentioned, how it's defined, and then come back and redo those statutes so they're all consistent. That's the first thing we need to do. Second thing we need to do, this domicile thing, goes right along with voter ID. This is, I think it's absolutely important that only people who live here vote. And I actually think that our I don't know who, but there may very well be people. We've had instances of people, on campaigns, voting in two states, on national campaigns, staying here long enough to vote, and voting in other states. I think they need to be prosecuted. There's not much you can do that if you're Attorney General that won't do that. But I believe it's people who live here ought to have the privilege of voting, and we should not, and they should reflect the real will of the New Hampshire public, and not a group of people who come in momentarily to change the tide of the vote.
All right, here's a big one. Might be the last one we have time for. Health insurance costs and Medicaid expansion.
Medicaid, no to Medicaid expansion. Well, first of all, our hands are kind of tied as long as Obamacare is in place, and hopefully Trump will get elected and they'll repeal parts of it. But what we need to do is we actually did it a couple of years ago in New Hampshire. We eliminated the community rating for insurance companies, and for some people, insurance rates spiked, but the number of insurance companies, multiple number of insurance companies moved in the state, and over a long period of time, actually insurance rates would have gone down as competition increased. We need to do that. We need to allow like schools or other industries to sign contracts with physician practices, keep them on retainer to provide services for the people of that organization or that school. We should also allow for concierge services to provide medical care for people. We also need to take a look at the entire way we regulate the healthcare industry, and we need to make it much more competitive.
All right, one more thing. I assume you've been talking to voters. What is on their minds? What's the most important thing to them in 2016?
The cost of living in New Hampshire is the most important thing. People have seen their electricity rates go up, their energy rates go up, their property taxes go up, the cost of schools go up, the cost of municipal government going up, and they're not, and without seeing any positive improvements or efficiencies. And I think that's what a lot of people are telling me. They don't know how much longer they can stay in New Hampshire. It's becoming extremely difficult, especially for people on fixed incomes or people who are not on the higher scale. And when you add to that the inability, the lack of manufacturing jobs, and as they've sort of moved out of state, there's not a lot of opportunities for people coming out of school, to work in a meaningful, well-paying job. So I think we need to take a look at that.
All right, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you or do something to help your campaign, how would they reach you?
They could reach me on my cell phone at 603-867-3999.
All right, Andy, thank you very much for taking some time to talk to me today.
Thank you. I wish I had more time.
Yeah, you have a great evening.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, that was Andy Kohlhofer, Rockingham District 33. Give him a call if you want to help him out. New Hampshire House candidate John Washburn is up next. He is running in Hillsborough District 21. This conversation includes some really insightful information about the legal system in the courts in New Hampshire. Let's check it out. All right, my next guest is a solo law practitioner with a local practice. In addition to practicing law, he has worked as an accountant, a department store clerk, a rural postal carrier, a warehouse worker, and a security guard. So he's not just a lawyer, he's had real jobs. I'd like to welcome to the program John James Washburn. Good morning, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Good morning.
One or the other. Thank you, Stephen. I'm glad to see somebody look at my website. So,
Come highly regarded, by the way. Josh Moore has said wonderful things about you, and we like Josh. But I was cruising around in here, and I see a lot of good stuff, and I think we'll try to squeeze some of this in if we can. But because you're a lawyer and you're interested in, and I'll quote you, judicial accountability, that is a subject that I would like to touch on because not a lot of my other guests are going to have insight into that. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I've had, and I expect a lot of lawyers have had, bad experiences in courts, but lately things seem to be getting worse and worse. There seems to be a certain, to put it as bluntly as I can, arrogance from the bench. I think the other two branches of government really don't have enough oversight. I mean, as an attorney, I can respect the need for an independent judiciary, and I'm not saying that somebody from the other branches has to necessarily look over their shoulder all the time, but I really do think that we need a little bit more accountability. Now, I know there have been attempts in the past. I know there was an attempt to give the legislature some input into court rules, which sometimes can be, well, I don't want to say controlling, but they're not supposed to have the force of a statute, but sometimes they do in terms of filing deadlines, procedural matters, and it seems like the courts are sort of left on their own to decide how court rules are written. This issue, too, about the appellate process, I mean, I'm not sure how you would streamline it, but I think something has to be done. I had a case recently where I can't get into the particulars at the moment. It's currently an appeal to the state Supreme Court, and the opinion that was written was simply horrendous. I don't know how else to put it. The judge in question didn't really apply the law, which I thought was pretty straightforward. And the opinion she wrote really didn't follow, I think, what are the guidelines for the proper writing of a legal opinion. And my client, who does not have a lot of money, the Supreme Court agreed to give her a reduced fee, and I'm handling it for a very, very small amount of money, almost pro bono at this point. And I can see the frustration over what should have been a very simple legal matter. I think interestingly enough, too, New Hampshire now has discretionary appeals, where at one time they didn't really have any right to an appeal, then they expanded that. Now they seem to be sliding back into that. But I guess to answer your question, I think we have to explore different avenues in terms of, is there some way we could have a little bit more oversight, perhaps expand, and I know this might not be popular with some judges and members of the legal community, but maybe try to expand the Judicial Conduct Committee, which it seems like it takes an awful long time for them to even handle a complaint. And from what I understand, I've never filed one myself, but from what I understand, it's a very lengthy and somewhat frustrating process, and there doesn't appear to be any resolution on this. I think overall, I think maybe the legislature should perhaps look at, well, as I say, exploring avenues of judicial accountability. I wish I had some simple answers for you, saying we could do 1, 2, 3. This frustration that I sense from other people, my clients, even other attorneys, as far as the way the legal system is set up. I mean, even the what I call the lowering of bar standards. At one time, New Hampshire had one of the most difficult bar exams in the country. When I came in from Massachusetts, I accepted the fact that I had to take the New Hampshire bar exam, and I'm proud of the fact that I passed it when it was actually one of the most difficult bar exams in the country. Well, basically the Supreme Court decided that, or the judicial authorities, that decided we should have reciprocity. And they opened the gates up to attorneys from other jurisdictions. And there was no more requirement that you had to take and pass the New Hampshire bar exam. Then they decided that this wasn't fair to applicants from New Hampshire, because some of these states have lower bar pass scores than New Hampshire. So they lowered the New Hampshire bar pass score. And as a result, they basically lowered the standards for bar admission in New Hampshire. And there wasn't a lot of coverage of this, any debate, discussion. It was more or less done unilaterally by the court system.
I can think of two particular cases that I know of where I thought the judge was crazy. Judge John Lewis in his domicile decision, and then recently the Croydon case. I think up and down the Croydon case has been ridiculous, because the way I read the law, we already had school choice built in, and it seems that the AG and the state school board and the court system to date has disagreed with what seems obvious. I think a lot of people are frustrated by that. Because when you can read it as a layman and it makes perfect sense to you, and then a judge says, "Oh, no, that's not what it means," everybody's like, "What?"
That's the thing. I mean, a lot of these things, they don't have to be that complicated. I mean, sometimes you do need a lawyer to understand them, and sometimes they should be relatively straightforward. Like in the matter I just discussed, I thought it was going to be a relatively straightforward matter, and it's turned into a hopelessly complex matter over. And there's not really any money or anything involved, but unfortunately, I think perhaps something else that maybe we could look at might be an intermediate appellate level, like some states have. We just have you're not happy with the decision and a court, so you have to go to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and that can take a while. So perhaps there should be some intermediate level of review of the judge's decision.
Concealed carry. Should we keep the licensing requirement as it is now, or do you think that's excessive?
Well, in terms of concealed carry, I mean, I basically very strong on maintaining that right. I mean, when you're asking me about concealed carry, are you saying that you're talking about the present permitting process?
Correct.
I mean, I'm actually against expanding it as far as making it more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see exploring an avenue of repealing the present concealed carry requirements.
Okay. How about pro-choice, pro-life?
Pro-life.
Okay. Education.
Okay.
Common Core?
Against. And generally against any one-size fits-all education.
Okay.
Because the thing is, I can remember, attending public schools in the 1960s and 70s when they brought in the new math and all the new things. And it seemed to me, I had the opportunity to look at previous textbooks, and it looked to me like they actually covered the subject better. And it seems like whenever the federal government or any central authority comes in and they try to basically dictate terms, and especially this Common Core, where they're talking about basically every jurisdiction in the United States, they're trying to bring, shoehorn into one definition. For example, I can remember in the 7th grade we had these science textbooks, and this was supposed to be the, part of the new education, the post-Sputnik era and all that. And then I saw some of the textbooks that they had used previous to that, and they had much more hard science in them, much more before they decided that, they panicked because the Russians launched a satellite, and they standardized curriculums, whereas before, it looked to me, I think the textbooks and the material was actually taught better before that.
I think it was much more rigorous. I agree.
Okay, at this point, a little programming note. We lost our phone connection at that point in our conversation, so I ended up having to finish the interview on a different day, on a different phone, with a different headset, calling a different number, so it sounds different. But here's the rest of the interview.
Let's talk about voter ID and domicile.
As far as the issue of domicile, I think perhaps that might be the next step. I know there is a voter ID law that, fortunately, that is enforced, although they seem to have carved out a few exceptions. I know when during the presidential primary, this individual showed up and had a sign claiming that you didn't need any type of photo ID to vote, and the Secretary of State Gardner was there. He went over and spoke to him and gave him a lecture about voting law, and he said, well, no, you still need the ID because you have to sign an affidavit saying that you do have an ID, you just don't have it with you, and you can still be required to produce it. So, I think maybe there could be a little bit more follow-through. As far as domicile, yeah, that's a good question because I know, I've actually had a few cases involving jurisdiction where this has come up between residence, citizen, and domicile can actually be the same or they can be three different things. So this idea of people who, that I realize maybe some of them could be exaggerated, but I don't know about people who, they come here for the primaries, decided they like New Hampshire and they might want to live here, so they find somebody's address that will let them register to vote, and they vote in the primary of the state that they're not a resident of. So I think maybe there could be more of a domicile requirement, requiring people, say, to be a resident for some period of time, to do something more than just say, oh, I intend to live here. But I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that'll work. My last question is, as you've talked to voters, what is the most important thing to them in 2016?
Overall, I would say it's actually the economy and people just trying to cope in this terrible economy we have. I really don't know what people are talking about when they claim that there's some sort of recovery and everything's getting better. Or even today, somebody at the Fed made some statement, and all the stock indexes went real seriously tumbling. It seems like it's just a roller coaster ride. And I know people who've been unemployed for years now. On top of that, I think we do have certain disincentives to work and some really stifling factors that, both the state and the federal government put on people as far as trying to run a business, really just trying to live. I mean, too much of my practice concerns, I didn't intend it this way, but bankruptcies and foreclosure relief, offers in compromise with the IRS. And a lot of these people, it really isn't their own fault. It's just kind of bad to worse. So I'd have to say it's probably the economy.
Okay, great. Well, we've come to the end of our segment. How do people reach out to you if they want to help you in the remaining days to the primary and hopefully on to the general election?
Well, if you live in Merrimack, and you can vote for me. And would you like a phone number? They can call me anytime, and I'll be happy to
anything you feel comfortable giving out.
Okay. Well, I can. I'll give you. I'll even give you my direct line, 889-2226, and I also have a campaign phone, 320-6713. And you can call me anytime except maybe between the hours of 2 and 5 a.m. But and I also have a website if you're interested, www.electjohnwashburn.org.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck.
Okay, that was John Washburn from the town of Merrimack. This is Hillsborough District 21 for the New Hampshire House. We're going to switch gears now and have a conversation with somebody running for the state Senate, an interesting race. This is Joe Duart, who is running for State Senate District 16.
All right, I am speaking to Joe Duart, who is a longtime New Hampshire House rep from Rockingham District 2, and he is running for the New Hampshire State Senate in District 16. Joe, thanks so much for taking some time to talk to me.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, so I really want to talk issues, but obviously the really big news today is that the New Hampshire Secretary of State Bill Gardner has ruled that your no longer primary opponent Donald Winterton has been disqualified for not meeting the 7-year residency requirements, which means you no longer technically have a primary.
That's a lot of pressure.
I know, isn't it?
It's been a long way and a long road, and I don't know how this thing happened. I'm sure he made a mistake. But I don't really know the gentleman, but I've met him a couple of times, and he seemed like a nice fella. I don't have any animosity to him or anything, but when you have a race like that, you're always being watched very carefully, and you got to try to do, everything proper, because it doesn't take much for anybody to step over the line a little bit, make a little mistake, and it's very costly. But when you spend as much time fundraising and trying to get your viewpoints out to the public, sometimes you get a little slack and you don't pay attention to everything you should be. Like when you're the 7-year resident thing, I guess we could go on, but the main thing is he stepped up to the plate. I think he did what was right, and now I think what we need to do is look to see if him and I can work together to make sure that we can keep the Senate on the Republican side.
I agree. I really hope he does. I didn't see anything in his statement about that, but if he reaches out to you to give you some assistance, let us know, because we'd like to report that. So, issues, lots of issues, always lots of issues. It is New Hampshire, after all. You've been in the House for a long time, so you're very familiar with how things work, which makes you, and given your voting record and in my opinion, as a conservative pro-liberty person, makes you an excellent candidate for the state Senate, which is desperately in need of more people like you. So we'll start with something real simple that I think you'll have a real easy answer to. Where do you stand on New Hampshire's current requirement of a license to carry a concealed loaded firearm?
Well, we have the Bill of Rights, we have the Second Amendment, and anybody should be able to protect themselves. So I've always voted with the Second Amendment and to protect people's rights. I I'm wondering sometimes too. I know we had a open carry bill, and a lot of people, I guess, are afraid of that. And there's positives and negatives to it. But sometimes when you think about these people that mean to do some bad harm to other folks, sometimes when they see maybe a good guy carrying a gun, sometimes that may dissuade or stop them from maybe pursuing, something that would hurt other New Hampshire residents. If you follow what I'm saying, sometimes seeing somebody else there that can put up a battle and stop you from doing something bad, maybe you'll give it a second thought. So I'm okay. I'm okay with open carry as well.
Let's go on to a subject that doesn't get talked about a lot, I don't think, and I don't think I've asked any of the other candidates I talked to tonight this question yet, but I'll ask you because you've been around a while. Recent court rulings have improved, I would think, the ability of citizens to access public documents. Donna Green's case that went to the Supreme Court was a huge win for transparency, but you can still find that it can be very expensive to obtain public documents like voter checklists. Do you think there's room to improve this, and what would you suggest?
I really think transparency between the politicians or officials and the taxpayers is extremely important. I think they should have access to what information they desire. And I think it's very difficult sometimes when these families run into a problem to be able to get what they need because of the finances involved. Anything important to the hardworking people in New Hampshire, they should be able to access that, and they should not have to pay for it.
All right, the state Senate is a notorious club that values its privacy while we're talking about transparency, and by that I mean where the House has large numbers of roll call votes. The Senate not only frowns on them, but leadership's had a habit, at least as far as I know, of intimidating senators out of asking for roll call votes. If you had the conservative support, in other words, if there was enough of you there, do you think you guys could make an effort to get more roll call votes in the Senate?
Well, everybody knows my voting record, and I think to have a better understanding of our legislation and our voters and the people who pay the taxes, I think for everyone to know how everyone votes is very important. And I think one of the reasons, I think last year we probably had more roll call votes than I've seen in my 6 years. I think it's good. And I think most people, if you feel a certain way and vote a certain way, you shouldn't conceal it. I don't have any problem. I think transparency is a good thing between, as I say, politicians and our taxpayers. I think they appreciate that too. When you're not afraid to expose your vote, that means you're doing okay. When you try to get a vote in and worry about people knowing about how you're going to vote, I think that's detrimental to a good legislation or legislators. I think the more people know about you, the better they know, the better communication you have with them, the more you can do for them, and I think the more they would appreciate it. I know a lot of people talk to me about it all the time, and that's the feeling I get from them. They want to know what's going on and who's doing what, when, and where. So I guess that's pretty much how I feel too.
Okay. Domicile law in New Hampshire is a mess. The AG, the courts have screwed everything up. It affects election law. It affects voting. It affects results. What would you suggest we do to try and clean that up, tighten it up, and really improve our election integrity? Well,
as you know, I came to America when I was 6 years old. It is a big difference when you come here invited. My grandfather was a merchant mariner and worked for the United States. That's how my dad got here. But when it comes to getting to the poll, I don't think, that we do a good enough job of making sure that people who vote here belong here or deserve to vote here. I think we've seen it in the past. There has been some voter fraud. I think you need to start every time we have talk about some of the rules. Somehow they get bypassed. We don't get to do them. I think, listen, you need to show a driver's license for anything. You try cashing a check or anything. So identification as to who you are to identify whether or not you qualify to vote or not. I don't think that takes away from a person's right to vote, and that excuse doesn't carry much weight with me. I think if you're a legal person to vote in this state, then you shouldn't be afraid to show some identification to prove that. And I know a lot of people are against that, Steve. But I think voting is one of the best gifts that we have in this country. A lot of people don't even use it, but those that do should be legal to vote, and I hate people who do things that are not legal.
Do you believe that occupational licensing is excessive in New Hampshire, and if so, how do we address that?
I think one of the big problems is our small businesses are being choked, between federal intrusions and all of these restrictions and rules. It makes it very difficult for these business people, to grow and to succeed, and to bring a lot of these other families and businesses into the state. We need to start to help the small business, make it or welcome them. Say, hey, come here. Look, here's what we do. Set an example by doing what's right for the small businesses, and stop coming in with all of these regulations that drive these people crazy. And then when you look at some of these small businesses that want to grow, it seems like there's always something in the way. The first one is the tax structure. If you want something to grow, you don't increase the burdens or the restrictions on them growing. You need to make it easier for them. You need to help them. What do we do for small business in the state? We don't do much, Steve. I think we need to kind of step in a little bit and help them to pursue their dreams and to make their businesses grow. That's what we need. We need more jobs in this state. Our welfare system is terrible. We're ranked, I think, we pay more per hour than most of the states. I think we're ninth in order. But when you have opportunities for somebody to pursue their craft, their trades, their skills, and you allow these businesses to take these people on, and don't choke them to death with taxes. I'm sick and tired. Taxes is to a point where it seems once they come in and start to take a little bit, then it's never enough. The solution to everything is let's get some more tax revenue instead of growing the businesses so that we automatically get the extra tax revenue by keeping everything lower, not higher.
Do you support right to work?
Oh, absolutely.
I knew the answer, but I have to ask the question.
I know, but you go ahead. Yeah, I didn't have to think about that.
No thought at all. I think we know why. Anyway, because you just explained why, pretty much. You've been out talking to voters. What is it? And we're just about out of time, so we'll finish up with this question. What are voters telling you? What's the most important thing to them right now in this election year and in their lives?
Well, there's quite a few issues. I would say a lot of it comes on, and I'm a big pro-life guy. I mean, one person asked me if I'm pro-life. I said, well, I come from a family of 8. I got 9 grandchildren. I got 1 great-grandchild. Does that tell you how I stand? I think families is probably one of the strongest things that we have to build our society, and I'm a big family advocate. I think without strong families, we really have nothing. I
would agree. I really would. All right, so how do people reach you if they want to help you with your campaign?
Well, there's my website, which is joeduart.org. I also have a Facebook page on that, and there's a donation page on there. There's also a new Facebook page for me, and there's a link from my website to that Facebook. I think you answer. If you go through that, you will see all of the people that have endorsed me. You'll get a pretty clear picture of what I am, what I stand for. And donations, of course, are always the lifeblood.
All right, so for those of you listening, it's Joe Duarte, DUARTE.org. And Joe, thanks so much for taking time to talk to me.
Oh, no, thanks for getting the word out to my people and my neighbors. Thank you, Steve, very much.
All right, you have a great evening.
You too, sir.
All righty, bye-bye.
That was Joe Duarte, Senate District 16. short 30-second break, and we'll be right back with another state Senate candidate, Steve Kenda. The 603 Alliance is hosting world-renowned author Trevor Loudon in Nashua for the New Hampshire premiere showing of the new film based on his best-selling book, The Enemies Within. The premiere showing is next Friday, September 16th, 7 p.m. at the Crown Plaza in Nashua. Tickets are only $10 per person. You can reserve a spot in advance and pay at the door, or you can pay online at 603alliance.org. If you would like additional information about the event or Trevor Loudon, please contact event manager Dial Lothrop at 603-864-9287.
All right, well, let's get started. My next guest is the CEO of HigherAbility.com, LLC, CFO and co-founder of RegMate Incorporated, and manager at Kenda Capital Management, LLC, and is running in the Republican primary in New Hampshire State Senate District 24. Steve Kenda, thanks for being on the program.
Great to be here. Thanks, Steve.
All right, so I've been interviewing candidates all week, and I feel like I'm asking all the same questions, but, well, you know, that's kind of how it works. Let's start with some simple stuff. We currently require a license to carry a concealed firearm. Do you think we should keep that the same, or should we make it optional?
Constitutional carry. I mean, there's no reason for us to have to license. I mean, Vermont has no license, for heaven's sake, and I think they're safer up there than we are down here. Let's get rid of it.
I agree. All right. Recent court rulings have improved the ability of citizens to access public documents and records, but it can still be really expensive, especially when you're trying to get your hands on voter checklists, for example. Do you think there's room to improve the transparency and the cost of these public documents, and what would you suggest to improve that?
We need to find a way to do it because they're public. They are the public's documents. Any government work that's going on should be rightfully be able to be accessed by any taxpaying or any citizen, here where we live. The way you improve it is by putting in an intelligent document management system so that the documents are readily searchable, readily traceable, readily identifiable, and there should be no reason why, similar to the way we work with search engines like Google or Bing or Yahoo today, that if you want to look something up, you should be able to go and just find the source document. There's no reason for it to be buried somewhere.
Okay, the domicile situation in New Hampshire is kind of messy. The AG and the courts have embraced and reinforced a very broad definition of domicile, which has a great impact on election law and voting in New Hampshire. What are your thoughts about that, and what do you think we need to do to change it?
I don't have the specifics of the language, but I know it needs to be tightened up. I would prefer to see photo ID with residency required for no less than some 10 to 21 day period.
You think we should keep same-day registration?
No, I don't like same-day registration. I think it makes it too easy for people to commit fraud. We had a fairly serious set of issues up there here in Rye. We had 350 people, I think, show up and register same day with certified letters that went out with people that could not verify their address. So we think, I'm convinced there's voter fraud going on in the state, and this same day registration, I think, plays a part in that. And truthfully, if you've just moved in the day of voting, then maybe you sit it out until the next election. I mean, I just don't think it's unreasonable to look for some period of residency before people being able to step into the ballot box.
All right. As a business owner, you're familiar with the incredible burden of health insurance costs, or you are familiar with businesses who are, depending on what your relationship is. And neither Obamacare nor Obamacare Medicaid expansion has done our premium rates any good at all. So we clearly need to change directions. What would you suggest?
I've always had a preference for health savings accounts. From a private employer's perspective, it gives the family, the employees' family, they can, in much like the way a 401k works, they'd be the beneficiary of this. It becomes like a financial asset, like a 401k that is passed, it can be transferred. It also, with a health savings account, it gets the consumer of the healthcare more closely involved in the purchase. I think there's probably over $100 million a year in savings if we can convince the state and municipal employees, participants in the state here, to move to health savings accounts. First is the benefit to the immediate benefit to their families, with no change in the benefits that they are currently receiving. Let me say it again: no change to the benefits that they're currently receiving from the healthcare perspective. The state could save over $100 million a year by moving them to health savings account and just asking them to, like any consumer, since this money is going to be yours and your family's, that you go out and shop intelligently about how you procure your medical service. That's one way. Obviously, the problem, some of the major problems with Obamacare that were early on were the inability to do cross-border insurance. I mean, look what auto insurance rates have. What's happened to auto insurance rates as a result of cross-border, the ability to purchase on a cross-border basis, and why we haven't been able to do an interstate insurance setup is bizarre as well. That and tort reform, without some meaningful tort reform and putting some pressure on the trial attorneys' lobbies, that's another major cost. We still spend 17% of our overall GDP on healthcare, I mean, twice what most Western nations spend on it. And of course, we got a very perverse financial set of incentives over in the insurance world. I mean, from your broker who makes his money on commission on premiums, to the agency that he works for who makes a commission on premiums, to the underwriting company in here, the large insurance operations who all make their money. But what CEO in a large insurance company wants to go to his shareholders and say, yeah, our premium, our overall revenue went down this year. So, and of course, our own state insurance department. How do they get funded? It's a percentage of premiums, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, since everything is geared around the growth in premiums, I think maybe somebody could take a high-level look at that over at the insurance side and come up with some suggestions. But
education, homeschooling, and the state education property tax. I think they're all kind of tied together. Let's start with the state education property tax first. Do we need to repeal that?
In the context of overall education, it has to be about local control, Steve. I don't know why the state is involved. I mean, obviously I do understand from the court decision back in the 90s why the state is currently involved. I just don't think they should be involved. I think it's the responsibility of local parents and teachers to educate their children. They should have the choice. This Croydon decision is really outraging. The Attorney General and in conjunction with the governor and the State Department of Education, this pursuit of not letting Croydon parents and Croydon teachers decide where their kids can go to school with their own tax dollars is outrageous. I mean, part of this is, again, Common Core and federal intervention, the ridiculous federal Department of Education, $70 billion a year budget and all of you seen since '79 when it was put in place is declining SAT scores. So get rid of the federal Department of Education, block grant that money back to the states, get rid of the State Board of Education, and somehow find a way to kill off the teachers' unions, because as a political organization, they're destroying it. We have an entire generation out there that we're willing to vote for some guy who thinks that socialism is a viable economic reality. I mean, I feel like we've lost a generation of people. They know how to occupy and they know how to protest.
Would you support expansion of the education tax credit?
Yes. Yes, anything that gives kids the opportunity to learn where they're best capable of learning.
All right, we have a couple more left. Right to work?
First priority. If we have a Republican governor and we have a Republican legislature, it should be the first priority. First and easiest thing to pass, gives us a tremendous competitive advantage relative to our neighbors for bringing companies and jobs to the state.
How about, I think we've talked about occupational licensing before, but it's not a subject that you can ever have too much of a conversation about.
There's some level of balance. I mean, I think if there's a doctor, I think doctors ought to be licensed. Someone shampooing my hair, no, I don't think they need to be licensed.
Last question.
Yep.
You've obviously been talking to voters and activists and people in the neighborhoods and people in the district. More than anything else, what are they focused on in this election, if anything?
A lot of them express concerns from a national perspective. I hear a lot of people talking about security and the borders. I mean, a lot of people have been caught up in the national elections, which is interesting. I mean, you could barely find people who are actually focused on the state senate elections here until the past week or two. So now the activity has really picked up. People overall, though, it's that sense of insecurity. People are afraid. They're worried about the changes they see going on in the country. They're been very frustrated and tired of the past 7 years with Obama. They worry about their kids and grandkids having to sit on the $20 trillion in debt. which is, it was 10 trillion. I think when Obama came in, he's nearly doubled it here, and we have so little to show for it. I mean, anemic GDP growth, very historically low workforce participation. There are a lot of people that are out of work, working part-time. The ridiculous Obamacare cap and the 30 hours there. Plenty of people working 27, 29 hours a week. But being able to avoid the health care cost of having someone considered full-time liability. There's just a lot of insecurity. People haven't had raises in years. I mean, it's tough economic times. People are they're doing what they have to do, and they just don't feel the government's doing what they should be doing.
Which is less.
Yeah, we don't need more government jobs.
No, we certainly don't. All right, so you are in a three-way primary. The primary is this Tuesday, the 13th. How do people get in contact with you?
It's actually a four-way primary.
Is it? Who did I miss?
There's Dan Innes, Ray Tweedy, Jim Mazuri, and myself.
Oh, Jim. I forgot about Jim. Sorry, Jim.
People can reach out to me at Kenda for Senate. You can use the 4, either the digit or the word. KendaForSenate.com is probably the easiest way. Or people are welcome to give me a call too. My phone number is published. That's in the white pages, and feel free to call me up personally.
All right, Steve. Thanks a lot for taking time to talk to me.
Steve, thank you very much.
All right, you have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, thanks again to Steve Kenda for taking some time to talk to us. Our final guest in this hour is David McRae. He's also running for the New Hampshire House from Hillsborough, District 21. Here we go.
David McRae has served on and as chairman of the Merrimack Town Council and Board of Selectmen. The Town Planning Board has plenty of volunteer work to his credit and hosted a number of local access cable TV programs. Dave, let's get right to it. You've tossed your name into a very crowded Republican primary. Why?
To make a long story short, I see what's going on as far as legislation towards the business people, and I really don't think there's anyone out there really looking out for us the way they should. I mean, as far as the Merrimack contingent, all good people, and I'm not just saying that. Every one of them is good, but you know what? Most of them don't work. Most of them, I don't think, are living in the same world I'm living in. And, everyone says I'm too busy. Well, I'm busy too, but I really felt it was time to get involved and, go down there and see what's going on. Again, I'm not naive enough to think I'm going to go there and change the world. Mm-hmm. But I do want to go there and start finding out why workers' comp is the worst in the country. Why our unemployment laws are so bad. And I think if the business is doing well, I think I want to see if I can help.
I think one of the important things there would be taxes, business taxes. We recently had a small cut in business taxes, which appears to have caused a pretty good change in the revenue situation. There's some scheduled increases in that reduction coming up. Do you think those are enough? Do you think we need more? What would you like to see?
What I would like to see is the whole BET tax be done away with. I'll tell you from a business standpoint. We've been in business 10 years, and about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a rough year. And federally or in regular accounting, we lost about $40,000. I ended up paying like $5,000 in taxes that year. We lost money, but yet I paid money to the state. And the reason is because it's a formula, which doesn't mean just income. It involves how many employees you have, how many this. A formula that I've talked to some really smart people out there, and I'm not convinced that anyone really gets it. So the answer is less is always better than more. But the whole BET tax is something that somebody dreamed up in the middle of the night and said, how do we confuse them so much where they're not going to get it? But like I say, that year, we didn't make money. We all got paid our salaries, of course, but we lost, and yet I'm writing a check to the state. And that was the beginning of me understanding. And then workers' comp, understanding that unless you're a big company, you cannot get workers' comp in the state. You have to be part of the pool. We've been in business 10 years, have never had a workers' comp claim. But our rules are so anti-business, the insurers won't touch anyone in the state with less than like 100 employees. So I just want to go in there and look at it from the businessman's perspective.
A couple other issues that are pretty big in the world of work and employment in New Hampshire are occupational licensing. Comes up every year. We have a lot of occupational licensing. What are your thoughts on the way we handle that sort of thing?
Again, I think it's the reason that when I see the plate that says "Live Free or Die," sometimes I look and I shake my head, because a lot of the things that are going on it's a great bumper sticker, and I'm proud that it's my motto. But the fact is, it is unbelievable, some of the licensing that they have going on. So, no, I would like to see it get a lot less. See, when I ran, I basically said I have a very narrow platform. I'm not for anything that involves taxes or fees or anything that takes away any liberties. And that's what and I call that a liberty. If I'm trying to make a living and do something and you're making it more difficult for me to do it, well, you're doing the worst thing in the world. You're affecting my way to feed my family. And we've had 250 years of laws on the books. I mean, isn't that enough? How many laws do we keep making? How many fees do we keep making?
Yeah, the occupational licensing
totally
is crazy. Let's move on to some other.
And the right to work.
Yep.
I couldn't be more in favor of that.
Okay, right to work. Yeah, that's another big one.
I mean, the idea that you're paying unions money, even if they don't represent you, is it's backwards. I mean, it's crazy. Like I say, to me, it's very black and white issues.
What do you think about, just the idea of having to pay anybody for the privilege of working? Not just a union.
Right.
I always ask that question, right, to people who are pro-union. I'm like, what if the person you go to work for says you got to give them $40 a month or you can't work there?
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
No, it's great, and yet that is what our government does.
Exactly.
I'm not giving anyone a news flash.
No,
but,
that's true.
And I keep talking about my business because that's what I understand. And now, as we've grown over the years, 10 years, I literally have to spend every Friday dealing with stuff, whether it be workers' comp issues, whether it be state stuff, federal. I mean, it just amazes me. And that's why when I see politicians on TV say, we care about the small businessman. No, you don't. You don't care. And this whole thing, the last 10 years, that anyone that owns a business is rich. I mean, that's just unbelievable. Gosh, and try to fire someone. God forbid. You try and fire them, and the next thing you know, again, I don't want to take up your time, but I had a guy that ended up losing his eyesight. We didn't try and fire him, but we said he can't work it anymore. Unemployment ruled that we were going to have to pay his thing because their feeling was even though he couldn't drive, there must be something else he could do.
And your business is driving. It's all driving, right?
Yeah, that's what we do.
Well, you should
put
him behind the wheel and take some pictures and send them to the Department of Employment Security.
No, they didn't argue that. What they argued is with the amount of money I did, that I must have other jobs for people. And just in fairness to that, once we appealed that, it was understood that they were wrong. But I'm just saying you ask any business person, we're scared to death to let people go because we know when we come before the unemployment board in New Hampshire, there's no such thing as winning.
All right, we got about 2 or 3 minutes left. Let's go through a few quick things. I think you pretty much covered all these when you said liberty, but let's just touch on them anyway. Let's see, should you need a license to carry concealed in the state of New Hampshire?
Yeah, no. I'm very strong on my support of the Second Amendment of guns. No, I don't believe you should at all. As long as you're a regular law-abiding citizen, no.
Here's one that's business related. Health insurance costs in New Hampshire. Huge issue. What do we need to do about insurance costs, Dave?
We need to be able to go outside the state. The whole idea of this idea that we can't be going to North Dakota and everywhere else to get quotes and do things is just crazy. And again, you asked one of the reasons I ran. One of the reasons I ran is like about 5 of the current incumbents right now in Merrimack are for Medicaid expansion and have made votes that don't make it easier to reduce health care.
Last question. I imagine you've probably talked to some voters. What are they talking about, and what do they want you to focus on?
Talking to people in New Hampshire, the biggest thing I'm getting out of it is they just don't want to lose any more liberties. Their fear is simple stuff like the seatbelts or the guns. Or I've had more people say, I know talking with a phone isn't necessarily the smartest thing. The idea that you've stopped us in New Hampshire to do it, and they're still allowing it in Massachusetts, just tells what a bad road we're going on. So the answer to your question, Steve, they're afraid that live free and die is going to become nothing more than an old relic.
All right, Dave, thank you very much for taking 10 minutes out of your evening to talk to me. You have a great night.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it very much.
Well, that's all we have time for this week, so have a great weekend, and don't forget to vote.